All right. So at this point, I am going to invite our treasurer, Scott Schulte, to come up for the treasurer's report. And we love our treasurer, so come on, come on.
All right. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Bishop. You know, it occurred to me as I was walking up here, so I am the treasurer for my congregation, and I have to say that there's been many a time that my report and the discussion on the budget has been used as filler time after during an annual meeting when everybody has voted and they're counting the ballots. So I'm in my spot. This is great. I'm home here. So thank you all again. The Treasurer's Report comprises of three parts. One is I'll go through and talk about the fiscal year that ended, our last fiscal year that ended at the end of January of this year. I'll give some comments on our current year budget, just to talk briefly about some of the changes that were made from what was approved last year, and that's the budget that we're currently operating with now. And then I'll spend more time talking about the proposed budget that you all have in your binder, and provide more description, more detail about that. So three parts to go through. All right. So first, 2024 results. Total revenue and support was $1,404,000. This was $40,000 more than what we had expected in our revised budget. However, it was also $66,000 less than the previous year. Now, part of that might be skewed by the fact that we decided to change where we were reporting funds received from churchwide for the DEM position, and we moved that from income into an offset for salary. So that contributed to the amount of about $47,000. Expenses were $1,348,000, $16,000 less than budgeted. It's also $122,000 less than what we had spent in the previous year. We had expected it to be about $102,000, so the additional $20,000 was a surprise. I would say also our lower expenses were driven by lower compensation costs for synod and campus ministry staff. Synod costs were also driven by lower costs for our bookkeeping services, which I'll be talking a bit more about. So taking together our total revenue and support versus total expenditures, our year-end operating surplus for last year was $56,000, and I have way too many numbers there. We'll call it $56,000, compared to a deficit from the year before of just over $9,000. Support from our congregations was $1,331,000. This was $81,000 more than expected in the budget. Let me say that again, $81,000 more than what we had expected in the budget. However, it's still less than the year before by about $8,000. However, to be that far over what we had expected is tremendous. That contributed to a 0.6 decline in giving from one year to the next, which if you compare that to several of the years prior to that, we saw decreases of 8.6% on average. And that was really driven by a strong January, where January is one of the strongest months that we have seen in a number of years. And I'll show you this graph. This is showing annual congregation support for the last 20 years. It shows that since 2008, we've seen the amount reduced in annual support by almost $1 million. When I started, our budget was around $2.2 million, and we've now taken out about $1 million of that. This also shows, if you look at towards the end here, that shows how unusual having exceeding our expectations in giving is. You can see the steep declines from the previous years up to 2004, and then 2004 relatively flat, yes, relatively flat. So I see this and I go, can we do this again? History looking at this graph says, well, we haven't done it before in the last 20 years, but can we do it again? I would love to be able to see that. So taking that all into consideration, I guess I just want to say thank you to all of you, to all of our congregations for your continued support in 2024 and in this year and future years. And I also want to further thank our congregations and our individual donors for your response to the annual appeal and the other donations throughout the year. Thank you all very much for that support. Yes. So to close out my review of the previous year, our contribution to Churchwide was $665,000. This was a decrease that matches what our total congregational support was, because we maintained our sharing contribution, or the amount that we share with Churchwide, at 50%. And we have held that for a number of years now. And I also want to point out that there is a detailed listing of all the actual income and expense categories that are in part of that budget spreadsheet that is in the binder. Just look for the 2024 actuals column, and you can see for each line item of the budget what our actual numbers were for that year. Okay, so let's turn to the 2025 revised budget. So the Synod Council approved revisions to the approved budget, meaning the budget that was approved at last year's Synod Assembly. You may ask, well, why did the Synod Council change it? Given the fact that we approved this budget in June, and then we don't start that budget year until next February, there's a passage of time. And within that passage of time, there are often, in fact, nearly every year, there are often changes in what our expectations were for particular budget categories. We get to see how the year actually ended, so we have more data. And then, in addition, there's just more information that we have that we can apply to our current year. And so, as I said, the Synod Council approved changes to the budget to help, I'll say, right-size some of the categories, or maybe make them more closely match what our expectations are. And you can see these changes in that same budget spreadsheet. It would be under the category, or the column heading of fiscal year ending January 31st of 2026, revised. And so you can see the changes from what was approved to what was revised. The major themes for these changes were to provide some greater transparency for some areas of the budget, to support a one-time event, which I will get to, and to put some of that surplus that we realized from 2024 into work, continuing to support the ministries that we have, and continue to support them on the prior year basis. Key changes in this budget were the temporarily restricted funds released to support completion of 4 audits. And I'm sure you're going, 4 audits, what's that deal? So to be honest, during COVID, as a preemptive move, we delayed our audit for that year to help mitigate that expense. And frankly, we have been struggling to catch up with that. Through a combination of things that, if you want to hear that, a lot of those details, I'll be glad to share them with you. But we have gotten behind in completing those audits. And so we've put a stake in the ground that we want to get those completed this year, and so that we can start next year, the next fiscal year, where we need to be. Having completed an audit for the 2024 fiscal year and ready to start an audit for 2025. So, however, that requires some additional cost, more than we have usually in a budget. And so we increased our temporarily restricted funds to be released to support that process of completing those audits. We've moved bookkeeping services out of staff compensation, where they were before, to office expense, to kind of help differentiate the fact that the difference between staff and the bookkeeping service that we use. We restored full funding for the fall theological conference, We had thought that we might be able to eliminate that and make that, or see if that would be self-sustaining. It wasn't. So we've added that back to the budget. And then we have a breakout of office expenses just to provide more visibility there. And also I want to give kudos to the bishop and to Rich Gates, our administrator, about reduction in office operating expenses. They are relentless in looking for ways for us to save money on our office expenses. So Bishop and Rich, thank you very much. Okay, so that ends my summarization of the 2025 changes to the budget. Let's go on to the next year, 2026 proposed budget. So this is, if you were looking or have looked at the, sure, yes, I am.
You want any questions about the treasurer's report before we do the budget, or?
Not really.
Okay. I love it. Then I'm going to sit back down.
Okay. I'm being honest, right? What can I say? So 2026 proposed budget. That is in the column in the budget spreadsheet that is green. Wait a minute, let me make sure it's green. Yes, it is green. And so this is the budget that we will be looking to approve after the completion of my report. I provided a pretty detailed explanation in my written report that would explain the changes from this current year budget to the next year. So this morning I'm really going to focus and more on walking through the budget and provide some additional explanation around what are the different budget categories and the amounts that are allocated for each of those. So it's more of a narrative budget kind of approach as opposed to showing you a spreadsheet, which I don't think, not many people appreciate that. I mean, treasurers do, but not many beyond that. Okay, so first is supporting our synod ministries. How are they funded? So to support all of our ministries, we are planning to spend in next year's budget $1,286,000. This is a decrease of about $19,000 from what we had estimated for this year. The largest part of that funding is congregational support for $1,175,000. In addition to that, though, there's annual appeal income or donations of about $20,000, temporarily restricted funds and interest around $71,000, and then grant reimbursements. This is where the area of the budget where if we receive grants for churchwide or other reimbursements from a variety of organizations, we would put those there. First and foremost, if I can get this to go forward, there we go. First and foremost, we are church together. And so right at the beginning of our budget expenditures, we indicate that we are going to share half of what we receive in our donations from our congregations with Churchwide. As I mentioned, this is a percentage that we have maintained for a number of years, and I'll be honest, we've had some discussion about that. Right, Bishop? Yes, we've had some discussion, but came down on the side of we want to maintain that percentage as long as we possibly can. Next up is ministry entrusted to the Synod. So this area of the budget is where we support ministries which help develop leadership and help grow disciples so that together we can share the good news. This area of the budget supports the work of Camp Tomashinga and Hollis Renewal Center. These ministries providing outdoor ministry space so our kids and congregations have places to go for retreat and to get in touch with God's creation. In addition, we will support advocacy in Kansas, as the bishop had talked about this morning, as a part of our working ecumenically with voices on matters important to all corners of the Synod within Kansas, so the Kansas Interfaith Action Coalition. As you may recall, in last year's Synod Assembly, we approved the Synod becoming a Reconciling in Christ Synod. A part of that commitment means that we will provide some financial support for reconciling works, and so you see that included here. If you enjoy having a pastor or a PMA to lead you, that's due to the work of the candidacy committee or the PMA team who have shepherded those interested in ministry along the way. And in addition, various ministries that help develop giving and the stewardship of resources through teams and committees such as Lutherans Restoring Creation, the stewardship and the companion synod teams. We have support for those, for the workings of those teams. And we also partner with other synods in our region, Region 4, in seeking new ways to being the church. The Ministry of Oversight and Pastoral Care. So our synod staff and campus ministry pastors provide support and encouragement to congregational leaders and students in the highs and lows of life together. So this area includes the salaries and travel expenses of the synod staff, who are there to support and encourage congregations and leaders to assist during times of transition and conflict, and to provide guidance and resources for congregations as they are committed to being there in whatever the circumstances. The staff compensation for this year includes a 3% salary increase for all the staff. A change was made to eliminate the director of lay ministry position. And we've also included a placeholder amount of $36,000 for a potential increase in benefits costs due to the new staff. What does that mean? Well, for the past several years, we have, from a financial standpoint, have taken advantage of the fact that both the bishop and Dave, the bishop's assistant, have been on Medicare. So that's reduced our staff cost.
For several years, just for a couple. How old do you think I am? A couple years.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I hit a nerve there. Okay. All right. We put that placeholder there because it's probably unlikely that the next bishop and bishop's assistant are going to be on Medicare. So forever how short a time. So we needed to have to try to anticipate the increased cost due to that. We have two campus pastors working in both Kansas and Missouri, one at K-State, the other in St. Louis, and they help to raise up leaders among young adults and help them grow in their faith. There is not a pastor at KU presently. Support for campus ministry has decreased to reflect a reduction in support from the Synod, and also the transition of the grant that we have received from Churchwide. That church no longer comes to the Synod. It goes directly to the ministry sites at K-State and St. Louis. We have funding for the Fall Theological Conference and also for a First Call workshop that is held in conjunction with the Theological Conference. The Ministry of Place and Property. So as Bishop Candia mentioned, in 2019, we decided to share office space with the local diocese of the Episcopal Church in Western Missouri. They have been great partners with us and have been very generous in providing the support for us as we moved in and occupied our space. We have space that fulfills the needs of the staff and provides for good meeting space when needed for various team and committee meetings. There are also the usual costs of running an office of any kind of organization, paper, copier, phones, that kind of stuff, computers. This is where we also have the amount for audits. As you can see, an annual audit costs about $13,000. So hence the need to release some additional restricted funds this year to pay for those audits, since we're paying for, almost 4. That gets expensive. And then also some additional categories on here: asset replacement. So this is an area where we're planning ahead for when we have to replace assets. For example, like the cars that are provided for the bishop and the staff. We had to replace those this last summer, and so we need to contribute to asset replacement so that we can purchase new ones when they are next needed. And accounting services, as I mentioned, we had moved that out of staff compensation and moved it here. We also are able to realize a reduction in that due to the change in bookkeeping services that we implemented in 2024. However, we did increase the amount for that by 3% to be consistent with the staff increases. Ministry of Leadership and Outreach. As we walk together, we need to support those that lead us by helping them communicate and providing them with the tools that they need. The same is true of enabling our congregations to reach outward to those in need of hearing the good news. So there are funds for Synod Council meetings, conference and deans gatherings, as you can see. And then in addition, there is a set aside for bishop transitions so that we anticipate and be prepared for the turnover of the bishop and staff in election years. So we have a contribution each year to help build up a fund to cover the expenses for a bishop transition, since we know those will happen. So I had mentioned previously that in last summer we had changed our bookkeeping services. We replaced the previous company, Adams Brown, as the provider of our accounting services, and we had worked particularly with Barbara Beadle, who had been passed along through several different organization changes. Barbara had worked with the Synod since the Synod was started. However, it was as we realized it was time for a change, and so we made that change last year and welcomed in Michelle Goodwin, who is a member of Advent in Olathe, Kansas, to be our new bookkeeper, and thus far she has been a wonderful bookkeeper for us, and has been marvelous, and is working really well with Rich Gates to implement some changes in processes and in streamlining some of those processes, and also providing greater visibility to reporting to help the working of the Synod staff. In closing, I would like to express my thanks to the members of the mission budget team who are listed on the screen here. It's a joy and a privilege for me to be able to work with all of them, and I want to thank them for all of their hard work. And with that concludes my report. I want to thank you for your time, and Bishop, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. What I said in the Synod Council, I'm going to say this out loud to this group. I love working with the Synod Council members and the officers that you have. It's a great team. As you can tell, we get along pretty well, even as we interrupt each other. So thank you for the privilege of doing this together. So the budget comes to you from the Synod Council, so it doesn't need to be moved and seconded, and is properly before you. Now is your time for discussion, for questions, and again, a reminder to please go to the microphone, wait to be recognized, share your name, your congregation, and then to speak. Microphone number 1.
Hi, Gary Teske, retired pastor living in Topeka. Just a question. In line 42, you have campus ministry salaries and Ben. I'm just curious who Ben is.
Need my microphone. There we go. Ben's the guy that lives out back. No. Ben is actually benefits. So it's...
benefits.
Benefits, yes.
Salaries and benefits.
Salary?
Microphone number 2.
I'm Pastor Shelley Hawley from Oberlin, Kansas, Faith Lutheran Church. I just want some clarification. I don't think I missed it. You said we're going to be removing from the budget funds for campus ministry at KU. Is that a position that's been just eliminated? There's no hope for it to be filled? Because it seems to me if there is an anticipation of looking for someone, we should still be setting aside funds for that purpose. Thank you.
Yeah. So for that position, we did reduce that, really based on the fact that there isn't a campus pastor at KU at this point. And I would say that our thinking is that that's probably not going to be filled soon, and I'm looking at the bishop just to confirm that. I think if that does come to pass, then that's one of the revisions that we would have to look to make to support that campus pastor. So our intention would be to support, if there is a campus pastor, a Lutheran campus pastor there, then we would support them with the same resource amounts that we do for K-State and St. Louis.
So just a further clarification, obviously the amount of money going to campus ministry has decreased. Last year we did leave in the budget money for KU, so it was larger, and they have been vacant without a pastor for a while. So in looking at the whole budget and trying to do budget cuts, that was a decision that was made. Currently, KU campus ministry happens ecumenically. Our United Methodist siblings, the campus pastor comes from the United Methodist Church, and the Lutheran campus ministry provides the building, Westwood House. So hopefully that helps clarify things. Microphone number 1.
Pastor Jelaine Marple, she, her, Salem, Lenexa, Overland Park. So several, although not all, but several of our candidates for bishop are in a current congregational setting, right? So the bishop that is elected will leave in absence. The cost associated with finding a new rostered leader for that congregation falls to whom? Is it the congregation?
So I can answer that. So if it would be no different than any other pastor who takes a new call, they resign their current call to take a new call. The congregation then goes into transition into the interim, and interims are funded by the congregation. So the cost of doing an interim and calling a new pastor will be no different than any other change of call for any other setting. So hopefully that will. And I believe the bishop's transition fund is for things like moving expenses and also the installation.
Yep.
Am I correct?
Correct.
Scott,
Correct.
so
Yep.
it's not
That's what it's there
for the previous congregation.
Right.
Okay. Microphone number 1.
I'm Paul Merkline from Emmanuel up at Stuttgart, Kansas, clear in northwest Kansas. I've been a member of numerous agricultural groups, if you will, cooperatives, and we've had significantly bigger budgets than this. I go back to the audit thing. I cannot understand, I guess, why you had, if I'm getting this right, why there were 4 audits in 1 year and the expense that occurred with each one of those. Why? Yeah. I mean, we dealt with big budgets and we had 1 audit a year.
Yep.
I will let you answer that question.
Why, thank you.
You're welcome.
So as I mentioned, we delayed our audit for during COVID, so it would have been for 2019. Delayed it as a cost deferment type of measure. That kind of got us behind with our current auditing firm that we work with. So we encountered issues with delay with the auditing firm, but then also that we also had, I would say, delay with our previous bookkeeping service in being able to provide all the information that our auditors were needing. That delayed us significantly, and that was one of the main drivers for changing our bookkeeping services as we did last year. So I would say that the 4 audits that I mentioned, 1 has already been completed. The second one will be completed in early July. Third one in October, and then the 4th one next January. So that should catch us up. I guess I would also further say that the funds that we're spending this year were funds that we did not spend in previous years because their work was held up on the budgets that needed to be done.
I can appreciate that, but I guess my question is, isn't it kind of redundant? I mean, to do it every
Every year?
no, you know, that often in a year's time, if I'm understanding it. Maybe I'm not understanding.
Well, I understand what you're saying there. Yeah, to do that many in 1 year. We are required to do an audit for each of our years, and so we are following through on that. But I completely understand what you're saying. If we're doing that many in a year, could we just skip them and go to one? And the answer is no. We couldn't do that.
Who requires the audit?
The Constitution of the Senate.
The Constitution does. Okay, I did
Requires
not read
it.
that part.
No, that's okay. That is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
But our Senate Constitution requires an annual audit. And so, as the treasurer said, you know, again, full disclosure, which is very good for us to be transparent, we got behind. And so now we are getting caught up so that going forward, we will just have one audit expense each year.
Well, that's good.
But, amen.
Thank you.
Microphone number 2.
Pastor Matt Schlake, Zion Ferguson. I just want to clarify that on page 8, the changes in the budget we're seeking to approve reduce the incoming bishop's staff by 0.75 FTE, full-time equivalent. So that in essence, we're asking the new bishop to begin their term with 3/4 less of a human capital. I want to commend our synod, coming from another synod, already at the leanness of our staff. And while I would encourage us to vote in favor of the budget, have some concern about making a new bishop and their staff already leaner at this time of transition. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe to clarify for me, Scott, the one position that is not budgeted for in the next year is the director for lay ministry.
Correct.
Is that the only reduction?
That was the only yes.
So,
that was the only reduction. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'm confused. That's not a 3/4 time position. That's a 1/4 time position.
That would be true.
It's good to get clarification out.
Let me see where we took that.
Could you, again, what page we're on?
So we're looking at the back of the budget spreadsheet. So it's page 7 and 8.
Yes, 7 and 8.
7 and 8. There are salary and benefits details for our current fiscal year and then the proposed fiscal year, and that's what we're looking at.
It is it's a non-clergy staff that is also, so the clergy staff is being eliminated by 25%.
Oh, I know.
The non-clergy staff.
I know why this is. So the clergy staff is the position you were talking about.
Right.
The non-clergy staff, this is kind of misleading because we removed the bookkeeper from this. So the bookkeeper is still there. It's just being reported,
right,
not as staff, but as office.
I didn't think, right. So we've moved that from being on staff to in office operations.
Thank you for the clarification. That could be confusing.
Are there any other comments, questions, discussion? Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Joyce Benedict, Salem Lutheran, Lenexa, Overland Park. Still on pages 7 and 8. The first note says that employer Social Security is paid totally by the clergy. Yet in our compensation packages for our ministers in our individual congregations, the congregations are expected to pay the employer share of the Social Security. Why is that not being paid for the synod staff?
You got that, or do I have an answer, but if you have an answer.
Well, I guess one answer is it's not a good answer, and that's been our practice. I would say it's something that we have looked at and kind of continue that practice just from a cost-saving standpoint. It's certainly something that we could review, and what that impact would be on our synod staff salaries. Bishop, please.
In the compensation guidelines, which you'll have more conversation about tomorrow when they're adopted, there is a way to kind of break out those, I know, don't you just love having these pastors, housing allowance, base salary, whatever. It has been the practice, again, you can, that the compensation for the bishop and the rostered staff have used compensation guidelines. It's just not broken out in the specificity that might be
True. That's
because
true.
Senate guidelines have been used for the bishop's
Absolutely. Yeah.
salary.
Yeah.
So we just don't break it out as specific as you do in congregations. But the whole salary package includes, the salary, which includes, Social Security and housing. So it's just all one big number. So, but that will be something that the Senate Council, working with the new bishop and staff, will certainly be looking at their compensation. And
Sure.
we'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, you appear ready to vote. And this is where we're using our cards. So I'll give you a moment to get out your cards. So the budget has been presented before you. That's what we're voting on, the proposed budget for, help me out here, Scott, for
Fiscal year ending January 31st, 2027.
fiscal year ending January 31st, 2027, which, if you're like me, it's the budget for 2026. It's
True enough.
all those in favor of this budget, please raise your green cards. All those opposed, your red cards. The budget has passed. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And again, I appreciate the shout out to myself and Rich Gates, our Senate Administrator. We really work hard to make sure that we keep expenditures as efficient as possible. But your Senate budget team, led by Scott Schulte, really works hard to make sure that we always have a balanced budget and we spend within our means. And it gets a bit tight at times. So I really appreciate their work and all of your work. Great questions. So thank you.